All right. Hi, everybody. How's it going? Welcome to another installment of LA Guitar Hang. And I am so blessed today to have a jazz guitar legend on the LA scene and the international scene, the great Larry Koonse. Thank you for coming today, man.
Dwayne, my pleasure. I'm going to really have to earn that title now.
Well, I feel like you're helping me bring this up to another level because I had Bruce was recent and Bruce Foreman. So now I'm really getting blessed to have I call you guys like the heavy hitters. I've been covering a lot of great guitar players, but guys like you and Bruce, man, it's like the next level for me, and I just really appreciate doing this because it's a newer podcast and it's still trying to get its legs going.
Well, it really means a lot coming from you. I agree. Bruce is definitely a heavy hitter. Wow.
Yeah. Well,
I
you
got a
too,
chance to,
man.
oh, thank you. I got a chance to travel with Bruce to New Zealand. This is probably, at this point, it's like 4 years ago. Now time has a different
Oh,
meaning.
wow.
Yeah, we had a ball. It was great. It was like a two guitar hang. And, occasionally Robin Ford would intersect with us. He was traveling with another group, and man, it was great to see. He talk about a heavy hitter. I mean, Robin Ford,
Wow.
Jesus Christ, guy's
Wow.
amazing.
So what were you doing, like duo concerts? Just you and Bruce, and then Robin would join in, or?
No, it was mainly Bruce and I, and Bruce would present some material from his one man act, The Red Guitar, which is amazing. I mean, it's based. Have you seen that, Dwayne?
No, I've heard a
Yeah.
lot about it, and I've seen footage online, like excerpts of it, and I would love to. I mean, I was meaning to go see it, and then the pandemic happened, so
Yeah.
hopefully, it'll reconvene
Yeah.
at some point.
I've seen it. It's incredible. I mean, Bruce is sort of he's very creative with prose as well as playing, and he's
Yeah.
created this narrative while he's playing the whole time. I mean, it's really amazing that he can pull that off. Anyway,
Wow.
he would present little bits of that, and I was playing with a trio with Tom Warrington, who
Mhm.
lives down there now.
Wow.
And so we would present short little segments with both of us, and then meet at the end and play in a duo format.
Oh man, that must have been fantastic.
It was fun.
What did you think of you said New Zealand, right?
New Zealand, yeah.
What did you think of New Zealand?
I love New Zealand. This is that was perhaps the 11th time I've been there.
Wow.
Bruce has been there a lot too. Bruce and I have been connected with the same guy, Roger Fox, who's really instrumental in bringing a lot of jazz artists there. In fact, I think he brought Michael Brecker there on his last tour. And he
Wow.
also runs a big band. And, New Zealand is just, first of all, the people are really friendly. The environment is beautiful. The beaches are amazing. There's no natural enemies. They don't have any terrorist action there, never have.
Right.
It's just a great vibe. I love the place.
Man, I tell you what, the last few years I've been really thinking about moving there.
Wow.
With I've never been there, but with the current state America's in right now, not to get political, but man, I've been thinking about it. I tell you, I've been looking into it
I
and
hear you.
watching videos on YouTube on, how to move there. I guess it's not easy to move there, but I think like a lot of countries, they want people. I think you have to have a certain amount of money and you have to have like certain skill sets. And in other words, they're not just going to let anybody in. But so, talking to my wife going, we both have college degrees. This and that.
Yeah,
So,
it is very difficult to move there. I mean, I know this just because Tom Warrington's a close friend, and he married a Kiwi lady, and it still was
uh,
difficult.
wow. Okay. Well, I have to visit and see if I like it, but I think I would because I don't like cold places. I'm a beach guy. I live in Huntington Beach. I got to be around the ocean and warm weather. And I know it's probably cooler there than here, but it's probably not that cold,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. It's a great place. I love it.
Wow, wow. Well, that's cool, man. So, what else have you been doing lately? I'm assuming you're doing a lot of teaching because the gigs aren't there right now.
Yeah, actually, I've returned to gigging some. In fact,
Oh,
last night I played with
cool.
Josh Nelson and a singer, Mark Christian Miller. We did
Where
a web,
at?
we did a webcast from World Stage.
Okay,
That's the club that Billy Higgins established.
right.
I think it was in maybe the 90s.
Yeah, yeah, I've been there. It's a great place.
Yeah. And I used to
Oh,
actually play with Billy there. I mean, one of the
oh,
first
man.
groups I played in um, for, a substantial period of time was a quartet that included Billy Higgins. It was with the bass player Herbie Lewis, who actually recorded with McCoy Tyner. He's on quite a
Wow.
few iconic recordings by McCoy, and he was a
Uh,
great bass player. And I was so fortunate. I can't, I'm pinching myself today, thinking that I had this opportunity to learn about time from these masters.
I can't imagine playing with Billy Higgins. He's one of my all-time favorite drummers. I mean, I know he was an LA guy. I think when I got here, he may have already been gone, but uh, his, like you said, his sense of time, there's something about it that's so loose but still right on, like
Exactly.
in his later years I even noticed that more so. Like I don't know if you heard that Schofield record with him and Meldau. It's just like, just it's heavenly, man. It grooves, but it's so open. It doesn't have that tight thing that some drummers will do. It's just, it has a bounce to it.
That's right. Yeah, and open is a good word. That's a good descriptor because he didn't play a lot. He
Mm-hmm.
didn't fill up all the space. So sonically, it was really comfortable, especially for a jazz guitarist, because we
Mm-hmm.
have that mid range stuff, and if drummers sort of hang out on toms and they don't have a really nuanced touch,
Mm-hmm.
it can be a particular challenge for us to sort of hear ourselves or to project through that sound because those frequencies are competing. Billy was always sonically out of the way of that range. Or listen, I think it comes from listening because Brian
Mm-hmm.
Blade's the same way. Brian,
Yes.
Brian, Brian, of course, is more active, but
Mm-hmm.
it's the same feeling. He's listening to you, so he stays out of the way of whatever that range is. And
Yeah.
it's at work.
Yeah, there's a certain looseness. I agree, and like one of my other favorite. I mean, I have a ton of favorite drummers, but like someone like a Bill Stewart is also at that level. But he's very different to me. He's like very kind of tight on there, but not in a bad way, like in a good way. Like when you listen to Bill Stewart, it's like it's right there. Where someone like a Billy maybe is playing a little behind the beat, or a Brian Blade is different.
Gotcha.
That's just the way I see it. But I
No,
could.
I agree. Yeah, there's these different perceptions of where to place things, and they're
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, yeah, and that's one of the things that I really love about your playing, and that I've always admired is your sense of time and how you play with the time. But it always just seems so relaxed, and it doesn't feel awkward because you'll do some things where you'll do these rhythmic things, and you're known for this. A lot of people will talk about, oh, this the Koonse thing or whatever, where you play against the time, but it just sounds just relaxed and natural, and it's like that must have taken so much work to get that going.
It's interesting, Dwayne, because I think it kind of emerged a long time ago,
Hmm.
early on in my playing, but it just wasn't as solid as it is now.
Yeah.
I was more inconsistent with it, and I wasn't sure what I was trying to do. And I think actually that is a gift to actually not know what it is. Because
Yeah.
once you know what it is, then you kind of hang on to it and it
Hmm.
becomes formulaic. And what I realize ultimately is those rhythms all come from a melodic process. So if I overthink the rhythm, it's going to change the way the phrase ends up coming out.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because if you think of a rhythm, then you're tied to that rhythm, and the rhythm really doesn't. It's not story as much as the combination of the melodic narrative with the rhythm.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes a lot of sense, and it just has a flow that's just very natural. It just sounds like something that you worked on to the point where you're not thinking about it, and that's really the goal for all of us, is to whatever we're doing, it just comes out naturally. And I agree with what you're saying. It's good to not necessarily know what it is, because I feel like with the last 30, 40 years of jazz education, we've been able to kind of distill everything down to the smallest degree where everything can be explained now, but sometimes that takes the magic out of everything.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Sometimes it's good not to know what you're doing. It sounds ignorant in a way, but there's a magic that gets lost if you know what everything is all the time.
You know, Joe LaBarbera told me about this one workshop that he was participating, or was maybe an audience member with Bill Evans, you know, because he was with that trio. He
Yeah,
was
yeah.
the last trio. And a student asked him what a specific voicing was at one point,
Mhm.
and Bill said, you know, I'm not going to tell you what the specific notes are because then that would take away the joy of discovering it yourself, you know.
Yes,
So,
yes.
or the completeness that comes from discovering it yourself, and you know, grappling with whatever it is that you need to uncover. There's a depth that comes out of that, you know, when you really work for it.
I agree 100%, because this kind of relates to teaching, and I know that you teach, and I teach as well. And that's one of the things. I Getting back to what I was saying, where everything's distilled down to the smallest degree. And there's a lot of teaching methods out there now that I've seen and heard of, where somebody will have this, okay, here's my formula for playing over changes or doing this or doing that. And if the student follows that, they actually sound good very quickly. But to me, there's something off on that, because like a lot of times with my students, when I'm teaching them, I'll give them the nuts and bolts that they need for a certain tune, and they'll say, okay, why don't I sound this great, or why am I not on that level? And I say, because you haven't played over it 10,000 times.
Yeah,
And I said, that's basically the last thing that I can tell you, is you're doing everything right, but you have to just play over it 10,000 more times, and you'll figure out what you want to play and what you don't want to play.
that's right. Well, it's, you know, ultimately it's not an intellectual process. So you
Hmm.
start. I'm like you, Dwayne. I deal with the nuts and bolts. You know, I give
Yes.
them all the information that I can regarding a specific harmonic situation, or you know, using chromaticism, whatever it is, arpeggios, all that kind of stuff. Um, and that stuff is very finite. I mean, I can actually probably cover most of what I would give them in terms of specific applications within a semester.
Hmm.
But I always give it to them with a caveat that, you know, first of all, it's not formulaic. No one scale is going to give you great results always, you
Hmm.
know. There's no formulaic approach that ends up sounding musical.
Hmm.
You always have to, I use the term, you always have to allow poetic transformation to happen. And that poetic transformation, that's really abstract. That's where it gets difficult to teach, because basically what that means for me is, you know, when I'm coming out of the gate and I play a melodic line, if I am too close to that line in an intellectual way, looking at the intervals, looking at the specific rhythms, looking at the contour, and I'm constantly replicating that, it's not, it doesn't pan out like a story. It doesn't take you on
Hmm.
a journey. It's just
Right.
a duplication of the same idea over different chord changes, you know, and it lacks shape. So,
Yeah.
you know, so I often, you know, when a student is ready for that next step, I'll say, okay, now we've been dealing with all this complexity, scales, all this other stuff. Now let's deal with simplicity, you know, and find something that is um, connects you with that part of yourself that can go from A to B without overthinking.
Yeah. That's great, man. Do you enjoy teaching? Because it's funny when I think about, I know that I don't have the advanced students that you have because you're dealing with, higher end like Cal Arts college students and this and that. Do you find it hard to teach students that are more advanced because it's harder? Like, let's say they have all their nuts and bolts together. I find those are the harder students to teach because I'm such a nuts and bolts guy. And I'm the kind of guy that's like, just transcribe a shit ton and do a shit ton of gigs, and you'll figure it out if you have the nuts and bolts down. Do you find that the same thing, or?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, the other stuff that you're talking about, Dwayne, you put it very well. It takes hours and hours, and you have to actually be in the sink or swim situation of playing live with other musicians, because most music education has to do with how do you find the notes, and that's the smallest part of it.
That's
You
the
know,
easiest part.
it's the easiest part, and it's the only part that's digestible. It's the only part that you can sort of put into some sort of concept that you can apply immediately. The other parts, communication, um, rhythmic variation, feeling, phrasing, articulation, those are things that are in the realm of sound and in the realm of feel as well. And of course, you can point to backdoor approaches, but it's always metaphor. It's never like do this and this and this, and you'll end up sounding like Pat Metheny. You know,
Right. And I think, and I tell all my students, and I'm sure you do too, you can't be afraid to not sound good, because all of us have to go through this period of playing like crap or whatever, where it just gets more and more dialed in over the years. And I feel like almost, and I Peter Bernstein once told me this when I had a lesson with him, where because I had said to him, like, I felt like when I was young, I grew up near the University of Miami, and I grew up in Miami, and all of the guitar players coming out of there, I always felt were so much more polished than I was, and I feel like they knew something that I didn't know. But I later realized it was a good thing, because at the time everybody sounded like Pat Metheny, everybody at that, and it was just, that's just was the sound, and I couldn't do that, even though I loved Metheny as much as they did. But then I realized, yeah, but you're better off not being able to play like that, because you're doing your own thing, even if it's not as good for a long time. Like Peter had said, like, you're better off being in the wilderness, and it takes you longer to figure it out, but once you do, you're going to have your completely your own approach. And I didn't realize that till later in life, and I'm wondering what you think about that.
yeah, I mean, this is a great point. With the advent of the internet and quick access to all this information, basically, anything you want is right there at the press of a button.
Yeah.
Um, it sort of negates that search that I think that you described so well, where you have to really dig for it, and out of that digging comes a personal sort of perception about how these things work, and a color. Of course, it's your personality, it's your identity right there that you're working with, and out of that struggle comes something I think really beautiful. You know,
Yeah.
so when you have access to all this information, it's exactly what we talked about. You know, 15 minutes ago, when you need to really get hungry for it, and you need to sort of find your own answers, as much as having some answers put in front of you by a teacher. I mean, a teacher is very handy, because it's a mentor, and it's good to get feedback. But really, we're talking about self-teaching from the ground up. I mean, that's the deepest way of
Mhm.
learning. um, I had some great teachers that were really, I think most of the value of my great teachers that I studied with was was the inspiration, to hear the model of them playing for you, or for them to turn you on to some stuff that you weren't aware of.
Right. It's like people like Jimmy Weibel, like those are some of your teachers, right?
Jimmy would be right at the top.
Yeah.
Jimmy would be, with Jimmy, what it was with Jimmy was, he really didn't talk conceptually about how to improvise. That wasn't his thing. But the biggest thing that I took from lessons with Jimmy is time. When he would play, his time center was amazing. I wish I had time like Jimmy. I mean, it was so immaculate, and his projection when he played, it was so clean and so clear. So you, it's amazing to. He's the only guitarist that I actually encountered from that generation because he was actually pre bebop. He was
Wow.
contemporary of Charlie Christian, you
Wow.
know, and
Yeah.
George Van Epps, that era. Uh,
Hmm.
but he was the only guy that I would listen to, that I would hear the roots of bebop. His swing was so, and his time sense was so driving.
And was he primarily a West Coast guy most of his life?
No,
Okay.
he was born in Louisiana,
Uh-huh.
um, and was sort of um, a big part of the Texas swing. Spade Cooley, Bob Wills, the
Mhm.
Texas swing scene, and the time there is beautiful. It's like
Mhm.
you can kind of hear where Stevie Ray came from later on, because Stevie's time was also like a freight train, right?
Well,
There's a
that,
thing,
yeah.
yeah, there's a thing to that Texas, you know,
Hmm.
time center that's pretty compelling.
Well, the way he does it, dum, ka-dum, 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 ka-dum,
Right.
ka-dum. That's part of it.
The shuffle thing.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
the upbeat is real strong.
Right.
you know. I need to. I really need to check Jimmy Weibel out more. I have his book, and it's an amazing book, and he doesn't have a lot of recordings under his own name, does he?
Yeah, he's a very interesting guy in that way because uh, Dwayne really, I mean, I was around him all the time, so I heard him improvise contrapuntally, and
Yeah.
of course I heard him play on a weekly basis for a brief period of my life when I studied with him. And I really consider him to be one of the heaviest guitarists of all time. Yet, I think, and this is with all respect, Jimmy struggled with some demons early on that he got a handle on, but
Mhm.
I think it prevented him from sort of pursuing his own career at a time in his life where he could have. When he was playing with Benny Goodman,
Mhm.
when he was sort of out there after he replaced Tal Farlow in the Red Norvo trio,
Wow.
and they would play blistering tempos. And Jimmy was also, see, people don't know this because I have some cassettes, and I've transferred some of them to CD. Um, he would play these blistering tempos. He was a total virtuoso. You know,
Wow.
in fact, I much more so than to my ears the other guys in that generation.
Wow.
So I really consider him to be like sort of like Django. I mean, just really so heavy, and unique too. The way he heard harmony and melody, he had his own take on it. It wasn't like anybody else.
It's almost kind of a tragedy that he wasn't recorded more, if you think about it, huh? Like if there was several, like all the Tal Farlow records we have, if we had that much Jimmy Weibel, that would be incredible.
It is. It really is. And it's funny. I mean, in a way, I kind of have a little of what Jimmy had in that I'm not a real ambitious guy.
Hmm.
I love music, but I don't think I'm ambitious. Like you think about Pat Metheny.
Sure.
Pat, what a force. What a
Hmm.
genius. And he's 24/7 breathing and eating and breathing music. And
Hmm.
from a young age he was sort of on a path where like he would be on the road constantly. I heard that at one point it was like 11 months on the road, and he didn't even have a
Wow.
place to live, really. I mean, he had an apartment in Boston, and it was. I mean, this is all stories that I've heard. I haven't talked with Pat about this, so this is
Yes.
secondhand. But apartments that were unfurnished because he really was on the road all the time playing.
Mhm.
And when I initially was on the road, it didn't appeal to me.
Yeah.
I liked going out for 2 weeks, but I once went out for 3 months, and I was like, I do not like this. I don't want to do this.
Yeah, I did that once in my life too, 3 months, and I was miserable. I couldn't practice, and I was like, I wasn't touring doing jazz, which was that was the mistake. But yeah, it was. I just, man, it was just, I didn't have a home. It was weird. It's not for me either.
Totally get it. And the thing with Pat, of course, was he was sort of iconic at a really young age.
Right. Yeah.
After Bright Size Life, he was kind of launched. People,
Hmm.
you know, wow, this guy is brilliant, and he's got his own voice, and
Hmm.
so I didn't have that, but even if I was playing for like audiences on a nightly basis and playing the music I wanted to play, I don't think I would want to be on the road that much. Even if the situation was a cherry situation, where I was making good fees and playing for packed houses. I just don't have the personality that would want to do that on a nightly basis.
Well, I think the reason why a lot of musicians, and not just jazz, but rock and pop and everything, why a lot of them they get involved with all the drugs is because of that lifestyle. Because you're on stage and you're loved by, even if like a jazz musician's not necessarily like famous or anything like that, but you're on stage, you're having the best time of your life, 2 hours a night, and doesn't really get better than that. But then when you're home and you're not home, you're by yourself in a hotel room, it's very lonely. And even if though you have friends and stuff, a friend is not a wife. It's a different thing, or a child. It's a different thing.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And I mean I was married at the age of 25, and I had my first daughter when I was 29.
Hmm.
So there's something about that was really attractive to me,
Hmm.
and I don't think that would be possible being on the road 10, 11 months. I mean, I have some friends back east that were very successful in that they were, doing tours in Europe and Japan all the time, and then little later than I formed a family, they started families, and it was a real struggle for them.
Hmm.
And they had to kind of stay on the road because that was their livelihood. And so we're all built in a different way, and I had the same experience. A lot of my friends, when they went to New York, they just knew that they had to be there, and I didn't want to be there. I spent time in New York, substantial amount of time, and realized that I don't want to live here. No
When were
matter
you
how,
there?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Well, when were you there? Like, were you living there or just visiting for a long
Never
time?
lived there, but in my early 20s, I mean, I could be up there for up to a month.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I had a gig there, and maybe I stayed over with some friends, or just to check out the scene, the music. At that time,
Amazing.
we're talking about the early '90s. Unbelievable.
Right.
The level of players and the number of players that played on that high level. I mean, it's stunning, and there's a vibe to it too. They talk about East Coast style.
Hmm.
It's like let's do it right now. Let's get to it.
It's very
No,
aggressive.
very much so. Just like the lifestyle. I mean, if you're going to put up with that lifestyle, you're really going to have to love this music to survive.
Yeah.
In an authentic way.
I was there for a short time in the mid '90s, and I was same thing. I mean, man, all the clubs were there: Visiones, Bradley, Sweet Basil's, all those places were there, and I went out all the time. I wasn't there very long because I realized I wasn't cut out for it. Instead of it would have been nice if I had stayed a few years, but I after like on summer, I was like, I'm done, because I had to have a job, and all I did is work, and I would come home exhausted, and I'd barely play a couple hours a night, and then when I would go to a jam session, as like at Smalls, it started at like 2 in the morning. So I'd be out till 6 in the morning, and then I'd go to work the next day, and I'd be wiped out for 2 days.
Yeah.
And I was barely playing. And the weird thing was, and I wasn't good enough at that point. I mean, I was okay, but I wasn't good enough to like show up and all of a sudden start gigging all the time. I wasn't at that level. So I was just scrambling like everybody else at the bottom. And that's not a good place to be in when you're in New York.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And in my 20s, I wouldn't have been ready for it either. I
Yeah.
on a playing level. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's interesting. Peter Sprague lived there, I think, for about a half a year at one point of his life. Peter
Mhm.
was, heavy early on,
Mhm.
amazing guitarist, and it wasn't for him at all. I mean, this is he grew up in San Diego surfing, and he just could not let that go. That was a big part of his life. That was, and I feel in a way I feel very similarly to him. I'm a California boy. I love California. I really,
Mhm.
and I like Los Angeles too.
Mhm.
I mean, it's gotten a bad rap because of the commercial music scene and the studio scene. But the fact is, that's kind of over anyway now.
Mhm.
I mean, it's not like it used to be. And I was never part of that scene anyway, and there was
Yeah.
always sort of this little burgeoning underground scene, not enough to sort of connect with agents to sort of travel abroad. That really doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Uh, now it does in greater quantities because
Yeah.
the playing field's sort of been leveled.
Right.
New York isn't what it used to be. Especially
Right.
post pandemic. I mean, it's kind of turned into a ghost town a little bit.
Well, I'm hearing about a lot of people moving out here now.
Absolutely.
You know, it's funny we're talking about LA because I'm from the East Coast, and I was in the same situation. I grew up in right near Miami, and I didn't surf at that time. I surf now actually, but I'm a beach guy. I like the sunshine, and New York was just too oppressive to me. And so but when I eventually moved to LA, I on the East Coast, you get brainwashed that LA, screw LA, it's all commercial, it's all smooth jazz. But I was like really thinking about moving out here because my wife's parents lived out here, and I've already told this story. But what I was going to get to is when I finally made my trip out here to see if I would like LA, I went out every single night. And one of the nights was you and Anthony Wilson playing duo. And that was like, wow, these guys are so great. And I had heard of you, but I didn't know you that well because being from Florida, the East Coast or whatever, and I had already seen Joe DiOrio in that same week. And I forget all the people I saw, but one of the nights was you guys, and I was just blown away by how great you guys play. And I thought, man, these guys are here, DiOrio's here, all these other players. I'm thinking this is going to be great.
That's
So
cool, Dwayne. Do you
yeah,
remember where it was that I was playing with Anthony? I kind of have a vague memory.
I think it was the Sportsman's Lodge,
Okay, right, right.
2001. Now, is that even around anymore?
Uh, I think Sportsman's Lodge is still there, but there's not a music series there anymore.
Yeah, yeah. It was just like a little duo, and I just loved it. I thought you guys were great, and that
Yeah,
was one of the things that made me decide to move here. I said, because in Miami, I've talked about this, but there was tons of great musicians, nowhere to play. Where LA, it just seemed like there was. Remember, I think Spazio's was there when I was still looking to move here,
and that's where
and
Pisano was doing his thing at that time, probably.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I went to the Pisano thing. I saw Diorio there. I think he was playing with a singer, maybe. I can't remember, but it was very eye opening. And then I saw Nels Klein but what it's like you were saying, like LA has always had a scene, but people don't think of it. They think it's all studios and it's all smooth jazz, but that's not true, man. There's the blue whale. I mean, which I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel like the jazz scene in LA up until before the pandemic has maybe been the best that I've seen since I've been here. You know, so many great musicians and the Blue Whale and all the great New Yorkers coming to play here. I mean, it just felt like everything was going pretty well.
I
You
agree.
know,
I mean, Dave Benny moved out here, you know, and
right?
Dave was interviewed by, I forget which magazine it was, and he was talking about this sort of renaissance that he was perceiving was sprouting in different parts of LA. That actually, for him, I mean, this is a diehard New Yorker.
Mhm.
For him, he felt like the barriers were down here and that people were much more open to experimental music and working outside of the box. And
Mhm.
so, you know, getting a report like that from somebody that has basically spent their entire life in New York means a lot. You know, and
Yeah.
you know, and there's a huge scene of younger players.
Yes.
There's so many great younger musicians here. I'm constantly meeting someone that I've never met that just moved here that just kind of blows me away.
Mhm. Yeah, and like you said, there's all these different pockets and scenes. One of the scenes that I really like a lot, also like Kathleen Grace is part of it, which is this Blake Mills, and where it's like this mixture of jazz and Anthony Wilson's part of it, kind of where it's like this mixture of jazz and singer songwriter music.
Right.
And I love that because I'm a jazz guy, but I'm also a folky. So like when you mix those two together, I just think that's just really, really cool. I love that stuff.
I'm with you. I love it too. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
beautiful stuff.
Yeah, man. So are you taking this time or like where you're doing a lot of practicing or writing, or like what are you doing to keep yourself busy nowadays?
Well, you know, actually, interestingly enough, the gigs are picking up, you know, so I'm doing the occasional webcast here and there.
Mhm.
I've done quite a quite a few different recording projects.
Okay.
Capitals Studios is open again.
Wow, that's great.
Later today, I'm going to do a recording project. So things are starting to pick up, and I'm teaching remotely, and it's a full time position.
Hmm.
So that's a pretty serious commitment,
Hmm.
and it's a lot harder. I'm sure you can relate, Dwayne. You know, it's difficult to do stuff in a natural way. You have to find creative ways to sort of convey things
Hmm.
because there's so much nuance that's missed, you know, through remote teaching. And you can't play synchronously. Although, you know, there is this new software. Uh, I think it's called Jack Trip, but there's variations called Quack Trip. So it's a software that's being developed in various universities that does allow for synchronous playing, but it's at this point it's not very user friendly. You have to have Ethernet. You have to have a really fast connection. You have to be within 500 miles of each other. It can be really inconsistent. I had one experience with the head of the program where I teach Cal Arts, David Reutzstein, where we were playing and it almost felt like we were in the same space. You can't watch
Wow.
video at the same time. It has to just be audio because there would be this delay and it takes up bandwidth. But I'm convinced that at this point, because of the pandemic, once software engineers, commercial software engineers, get a hold of this, they're going to nail it. So, you know, I mean, imagine, you know, you have a gig coming up with someone from Portland. Well, that no, sorry, that wouldn't work because that's over 500 miles.
Yeah.
We're talking about the speed of light, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So imagine you have a gig with someone in San Diego or San Francisco,
Hmm.
and you know you have to rehearse. You could rehearse online, you know, synchronously.
Yeah.
So you know that's a game changer when they get that together.
Oh, they definitely will. I kind of worry though that it's going to replace live playing in a way. That scares the hell out of me. I could be wrong about that, but because I've been watching a lot of these stream concerts, and all of us were doing everything we can just to keep going, but it's not the same. I don't know if you feel that way. If you've watched some of the live streams, it's not the same as being in the room with that person and hearing them play. And I
Oh, it's not
worry
the
that that goes away.
No, it's not the same at all. But I actually don't think it's going to go away. I
Okay,
think
I
there's going to
hope.
be a resurgence that's going to sort of cause whiplash. I mean, I really think it's going to come back in a strong way. It might take a little while, but the lack of it, I think, has sucked the oxygen out of the room, and people are going to want that oxygen again. Just that human interaction. I mean, I did. We talked about this at the beginning of this podcast, didn't we? Or was it before we started that I did a webcast last night?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. You were telling me. I wanted to talk about that. You have a
Yeah.
new teaching series going on. If you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I can talk about that too. But last night I did a webcast with Josh Nelson and a singer, Mark Christian Miller.
Mhm.
And, there was nobody in the room. We, of course, loved playing with each other. I mean,
Sure.
it's something that I've missed interacting with other
Hmm.
people. But it's very strange. It feels a little like you're, a stand-up comedian. You hit a zinger and there's nothing coming back.
Right. Right.
So that part of it is really strange, that because there's definitely this synergy when there's an audience,
Hmm.
and there's something that you can sort of feed off of and build. So anyway, I think people are going to miss that. Yeah.
I
Um,
think you're right.
yeah. So the video lesson site that you just mentioned at the end there it's the web address is called eliteguitarist.com, spelled as it should be, ELITEGUITARIST.com.
Okay.
And it's an online website developed by a classical guitarist named Tavi Gennaro, and Tavi's amazing. He's from Romania, and he's just a beast when it comes to playing. And he's also very savvy when it comes to creating web platforms and sort of having really high standards for videos. And I've been working with him for almost 4 years now. Um, and I go into a studio and I do this multi camera shoot, and we make engraved PDFs that go along with the lessons. And it's really in depth stuff. And there's a lot of levels that are represented. So there's stuff that's geared for an absolute beginner, and there's stuff that is geared for an advanced player as well. So at this point, I probably have, I don't know, 50 plus hours of videos,
Wow.
and over 200 pages of PDFs that I've created, all with tablature as well for those
Hmm.
people that maybe have trouble reading
Hmm.
uh, music notation. And, it's a mixture of a bunch of stuff. Some of it's conceptual. It's like, how do you play solo blues on guitar? You know,
Hmm.
what elements can you apply? Or here's a specific arrangement of a jazz standard, and I talk about it. I break it down, but it's written out just as it would be, written out as classical music. Everything's really specific with rhythms, and then some of it is just, for a beginner. How can you develop melodic vocabulary over a really simple static progression, and then throw in a few chords. How can you sort of immediately start having fun with this, and making
Hmm.
music?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow, that sounds great. Now, is it a subscription type of thing for the customers, whatever they pay a monthly subscription, or how does that work?
Yeah, you can either pay a monthly subscription or you can have an annual subscription. which is cheaper on a monthly basis.
Mhm.
And actually, John Story has been helping me out with this project, and he's been adding some lessons as well. And in the future, it'll probably expand further. But at this
Mhm.
point, John has sort of been a focus lately with providing video and PDF content.
Wow, that's definitely the final frontier that I'm looking into myself because I've always and I oh like you said I always prefer teaching one on one and all this, but I got used to doing the online thing because all my classes and lessons went online and I need to look into companies like what you're working with because I've never put lessons out online before up until recently. And I just started and I'm doing them short, like 10, 15 minute things. I'm really enjoying it. And but it's very, very low production. It's like I just literally do it on my phone, kind of like how Adam Levy does his. It's just like simple.
Yeah,
But you know, doing it the way you're talking about in a studio with a multi-camera setup, that's for sure the way to go, you know. So that's a great idea. And I think you know, you as you can tell, I don't you know, I don't know how they pay or whatever, but it seems that man, it's like sky's the limit because you know, if you're teaching lessons, you only have so many hours in a day and you can only charge so much per hour. But if you're putting out content, there's no limit to how many people can buy it or consume it or whatever.
that's
And
right.
that
And on a global level, there's a huge audience for that, you know.
yeah.
So the trick is getting the word out, knowing how to get the word out. And I'm really shy about posting on, sort of self-advertising with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there is you don't want to spam people. You don't want to, there's certain sites on Facebook that, maybe I'm reticent to sort of put a big ad up, you know.
Yeah.
Tavi's doing some of that. Um, but I enjoy it too. I actually like, you know, taking a concept and trying to distill it and trying to make it digestible in some way. It's a real challenge, you know.
Hmm.
I also have video lessons on a site called mymusicmasterclass.com.
I've heard of that.
That's a huge site. That's
Hmm.
that's developed by uh, a, 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 a great musician and entrepreneur named Adam Small back east. And Adam's concept for how to develop this is quite amazing. I mean, if you go to the site, I mean, it's like a pantheon of like giants, like Mike Stern and Larry Goldings, and so there's hundreds of people that are Gilad Haxelman, and there's all these people on that level, mostly East Coast guys that are these lessons are much more informal. So it's kind of what you described, but with maybe a multi two cameras,
Hmm.
but it's more low tech, right?
Right.
But his business model is fantastic because he's got all these names. When you put it in a search engine, you're looking for a video lesson, you're going to find that site very quickly because I don't know
Hmm.
there's not one site that I've ever come across that has that number of jazz heavyweights. And it's I shouldn't just say jazz. There's some funk guys, there's some, R&B guys, there's some rock guys. It's like this huge list of people that you would recognize their names. So it's a
Yeah.
really good business model in a way, and,
Mm.
he, and he's got a great way of he's a very fair way of paying his artists and covering costs up front. So I agree, it's a good model. It's just now it's the marketplace is starting to get a little inundated. So there's some stuff that's not so great, and
Right.
there's some stuff that's really good, and it's difficult sometimes to ascertain, you know, which side
Well,
is going to be a good fit for you.
it's like the music world in general. I mean, the amazing thing about today is that everybody can make a recording, and the problem is everyone can make a recording, right? It's like there's
Exactly.
too much stuff out there, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, do you have any like recording projects under your own name that you're working on or that you're thinking about at this time, or are you just doing more sideman stuff?
You know, it's interesting, Dwayne. I've taken advantage of this, especially during the summer. The bottom kind of fell out after the lockdown happened. I had
Hmm.
multiple. I was supposed to go to Japan actually a week and a half after the lockdown occurred back
Hmm.
in March. All that stuff went away. All my gigs, all my traveling went away, and all of a sudden I had all this time, and I hadn't experienced anything like that since like the age of 16. I
Yeah.
was kind of on a fast track, right? Balancing multiple things, teaching, traveling, recording, family,
Yeah.
all that stuff. And, all of a sudden I had all this time. And I decided to actually put a home studio together.
Mm.
Get some really great mics, I learned how to use Logic.
I love
Uh,
Logic.
oh, it's great, really user
Yeah.
friendly. So I want to do a solo project. That's my next goal, to actually
Solo
do just
guitar.
solo guitar. Yeah.
I
And
would
I,
love to hear you do that. That would be great.
so that's kind of what I'm thinking about. I'm right now, I'm just sort of thinking about what kind of material I would do. I would use on this recording. I have a feeling it wouldn't be jazz standards. I don't like making records of jazz standards. If I want to, it's already been done in a much better manner than I can do. For
I don't know
me,
about that. I
well,
think you would kill at it, but still, go ahead.
you're very nice. Thank you. But I mean, I would still have the ghosts of my legends sort of breathing down the back of my neck. And if I do a project, it would probably be mostly original material.
Yeah. Well, that's, a lot of us do that because, especially if you're not on a major label pumping out a record or two every year, most of us have to pay for everything. So it's spread out and we all want to have our music out there, right? Because that's our record, that's our legacy. I mean, even if you're someone like me who, I don't have that many fans or whatever, but I still keep pumping records out because when it's all said and done, I can look back at my life and say, look at what I did, and it doesn't really matter if anybody else enjoyed it. It's like you made your mark. You have something that people can remember you by, or something, that kind of idea.
I totally agree. I mean, my favorite recording project got very little press and was kind of actually panned by some people.
Wow.
It's a project I did with Darek
Oh, that's a
Owen,
great record, man.
who's Storybook, and I love this record. And it's hard for me to say that about other recordings that I've made. I mean, I'm really
Mhm.
not. I'm really don't listen to my recordings, but that's one recording that I can go back and listen to, and it's like a snapshot of that time.
Mhm.
And I tend to think of going into the studio and making recordings just to document that time, and also to grow from it, to learn from it, and to when you're in the studio, you really have to sort of hone your attention. It
Mhm.
forces you to distill whatever it is that you're working on into one moment. And I like that. I like that process. For me, it's a tremendous learning curve every time I go into the studio to do my own project. And so for me, that's the value in it. It's like a document. It's something that I feel like once it's done, I can move on to the next thing. You know,
Yeah, and also I also think, and I would think you would agree, the only way to get good at making records is to make records.
right?
Because the whole process, it's very sterile to me, the studio, and I find it hard to get over that. It's not like where you're at a gig and you're relaxed and maybe you had a drink and you're just chilling out and you're playing. When you're in the studio, it's like, it's usually a brightly lit room, although you can change that. But and it's the idea where for me, I get self-conscious, like, man, everything I'm playing, like, this is going to get recorded. It's like I almost feel like afraid to take chances, which is not the right way to approach it, but that's can happen at times. Where on a gig, you don't care because it's not really being recorded.
Yeah, it's
I
hyper
mean,
awareness and self consciousness and all that stuff. I have to say, I kind of finally have a handle on that, but it took me ages, and it took me, you know, hundreds of times being in the studio,
yeah,
and figuring out what I needed first of all, and how to ask for it from an engineer, and also just sort of getting myself out of the way, not letting go of ideals of perfectionism and trying to enjoy the process, as opposed to thinking, this is my one shot, and if I blow it, everything's over. And it's never like that.
yeah,
It can seem that way, especially when you're being hired by somebody else. It's like,
mhm,
and it's maybe not a jazz project. For me, that I still get self-conscious when I go into those situations. When it's like a big production and the room is filled with people that are like A level, and you gotta deliver. And
yeah.
that is stressful. That is really stressful.
For me, especially if there's reading involved, because I'm
Yeah,
sure you're a great reader, but man, I get nervous if I have to sight read something. Oh my God, I go crazy.
not
It's
easy.
it's
Not easy. Yeah.
wow. Yeah. How are you looking on time? Do you have to get going, or how you? I know you have a
Yeah, I
session
should
today.
probably wrap it up pretty soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I always like to spend the end of the interview a little bit talking about gear, just because it's fun. You seem to be one of these guys. I wish I was like this, where seem like you use one guitar and that's it. That's so great. You've got your one voice, and it's your Boris, right? Is that
Yeah.
and how long have you had that guitar?
Well, the Boris guitar is my main guitar, and I got that through Jimmy Weibel,
Hmm.
who was sort of the representative of Roger Boris on the West Coast in the mid '80s. So I was still in college at the time,
Hmm.
and I was playing an ES 175, and I love that guitar. But for me, it always if I was playing in the style like Barney Kessel or something like that, it's like ideal. But I always felt like it lacked the kind of sustain that I wanted to hear, like sort of a la Jim Hall. And this BG 100 had that sustain that I was looking for. So Jimmy actually turned me on to Roger,
Hmm.
and that's been my main axe since that time. I do a lot of nylon string recording too, and I have a couple of McGill guitars, Paul McGill guitars, and they're excellent. Paul's an amazing maker, and I've done a lot of Brazilian stuff. I played with Luciana Souza for a while,
Right.
and Otmaro Ruiz and his wife Katina de Luna,
Hmm.
and I love playing nylon string guitar. Billy Childs had a group called the Jazz Chamber Sextet. That's the first opportunity I had to play with Brian Blade. He brought Brian in to play the music, and that was all on nylon string. And so, nylon string and that Boris guitar has sort of been my mainstay.
Is your nylon string a cutaway?
Uh, one of them is,
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
Interesting. Paul McGill, I need to look into him because I have a traditional classical guitar that I don't play, and then I have a Godin, which is a electric nylon string, and
I have one too. Yeah.
yeah, plugged in, they sound amazing. But I'd really like to get another nylon string that's a cutaway that I can record with, because the Godin you wouldn't record with that, you know?
Yeah, the Godin, it does sound great. They're great guitars, but it doesn't have the air that
Yeah.
that a big body has.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you still, what's your amp? The what do you
Quilter,
use for? Oh, you switched to Quilter because you used to have that one head, that little, the
acoustic
Walter
image.
Woods. Oh, okay. Okay. Acoustic image. Which Quilter are you using?
Yeah. What is it? It's the Micro Pro.
Okay.
I think a 10-inch speaker,
That's a great
and
amp.
weighs nothing,
Mm,
and kind of to me has some of the qualities of like a Fender Twin
hmm.
without breaking your back.
Right. Right.
I love it. I love the amp. It's got it's warm yet it kind of projects the quandary that we all have as jazz guitarists is that we want a round warm sound. And that round warm sound can be covered by so many frequencies so easily, especially in the mid range.
Mm,
So this amp I think and the Boris can be a really dark guitar. So this amp has the ability to sort of put those frequencies out in a warm way and sort of still maintain that clear quality.
yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, you get a great sound out of anything you play, man. That's for sure. I mean, it's all in your hands anyway. So, that's really what it comes down to. But having a great
Anyway,
guitar and amp helps.
appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. When I studied classical guitar, that's when I started to realize how puny my sound was. When I played electric guitar, because, when you play classical guitar, you have to fill a space without any amplification. And that changed my perception of playing steel string guitar. And I agree with you. Most of it is in the hands.
And that's why most of us should play classical even a bit for a time, because I think classical guitar players have it over electric players all day long when it comes to sound from their hands. I'm not saying
Absolutely.
all electric players, but there's something about them that once you get back on the electric, it's just like, and that's one of the things, you sound like you've played classical because of your sound. It's there, it's obvious, you know.
Yeah.
I don't want to hold you up, but I just wanted to thank you so much for doing this, man. It was an honor to have you on here, and it was great. I feel like I could talk to you for 2 more hours, but we both got things to do. But have a great session today, man. And is it like you want to say who it is, or is it?
Sure.
Uh,
It's a project with the singer Judy Wexler,
okay,
who's making a new CD. Jeff Colella did all the arranging. Jeff's amazing, great writer. Really,
okay,
beautiful music on this project, and it's mainly a project of folk music
okay,
and R&B kind of music,
cool.
music with a message. And so there's some like Martin style dreadnought guitar playing, and
Mm.
today I'm just going in to do some overdubs, some stuff that just to sweeten it on the top. All the basic tracks have already been recorded.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah,
Well, look forward to hearing that. And if anyone wants to check out Larry's music, I mean, you're on all the platforms, right? You're on Spotify, Apple Music. Real quick before I hang, I've been wanting to check out the Todd Warrington trio records that you're on, and I can't find them anywhere. Is there a reason? Do you know?
yeah. So I started a record company with Tom Warrington, Joe LaBarbera, and Clay Jenkins, great
Okay.
trumpet player that teaches at Eastman now.
Yeah.
But he used to live out in L.A. So we all had projects, and we started this label, Jazz Compass, and it was fantastic to have this label for almost 20 years. We had this project. We put out, I think, 27 different CDs.
Yeah.
But the writing was on the wall at some point. To have a company that's manufacturing CDs had limited shelf life in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And sales started to go down. People were mainly streaming. So, like I said, the writing was on the wall, and we sort of disbanded about 2 years ago, I think it was.
Mhm.
Um, so I put my product back out there in streaming format, but Tom hasn't. So,
Oh.
so we had a distributor at that time who did that work for us. Our distributors was City Hall Records,
Mhm.
and they made sure that we had a presence online and made it available to with all the online retailers. But once the company disbanded, it became each of our own responsibility to sort of put it out there in that format, because
Okay.
we had online distribution agreements as a company,
Mm.
right? So once that was dissolved, you have to sort of take the initiative and make the stuff available. And Tom has, and now he lives in New Zealand, and he's sort of outside of the music scene and hasn't felt a need to make it available. So I
Okay.
wish he did, because I think there's some really special recordings.
Yeah,
And
I've heard they're amazing.
and I planned actually on my own website to make those recordings available for sale once again. Because I
Okay.
have quite a few CDs. And,
I'll buy one.
okay, one sale, ding.
Yeah, there you go. I'll buy. I think you made a couple, right? 2 or 3 with him.
Actually, I did four.
Oh, I'll buy all 4.
For, for three mainly trio projects, and the fourth with like guests, Bob Shepard and who else? I can't remember, but the
Okay.
fourth one had other guests. And
Okay.
I'm very proud of those recordings. I love Tom's playing, and of course, playing with Joe LaBarbera is always a joy.
Can't beat that.
And I've always had a special place in my heart for those recordings.
Well, I'll try. I'll contact you and maybe we can work something out. Thank you so much again, Larry. I appreciate it. I can't wait to see you again in person at a gig or whatever, and hang and talk some more. And I hope that you and your family stay healthy. And good luck on the session today.
All the same to you, Dwayne. I'm really flattered that you asked me to do this. Really
Oh
appreciate
man,
it.
it's an
Great
honor.
talking with you. Like you said, I could go on for hours as well. And it
Yeah.
would be interesting for me to ask you the same questions to get your,
Oh,
yeah.
in due time, man. Thank you again. Have a great day.
All right. Take care, Dwayne.
Okay, we'll see you.
Bye bye.